Are Pokémon rivals worse now? Among the changes the Pokémon video games have been through over the years, one enduring feature of the mainline titles is the presence of rivals. Characters who challenge the player throughout their playthrough and serve as a sort of benchmark for skill level and progress. Over the years though, the nature of these rivals has evolved. Evolved, a very fitting word to use to describe it, in some quite dramatic ways. In the early days of Pokémon, rivals were often antagonistic and mean-spirited, especially the first couple of generations. In Gen 1, Blue was this cocky, abrasive character that consistently taunts the player throughout their journey. In Gen 2, Silver was bitter, with this obsessive disdain for weakness, driven by a desire to prove his own strength by any means possible. Then, as the series progressed, the nature of rivals began to shift. While still being competitive for the most part, they started exhibiting more friendly demeanours, which is most strongly pronounced in the more recent generations. They're more supportive now. They're much less hostile and confrontational. But does that make them worse? Or is it just driving the player in a different way? Because that is what rivals are there to do. They serve as motivation for the player to get stronger. You know that you're going to encounter this rival several times throughout your playthrough, and you want to be the one that comes out on top when that happens. You want that validation that you've caught the better Pokémon, that you've trained them better, strategized better. It's a nice rewarding feeling when that happens. Older rivals drive this motivation via conflict. They do it by making you really dislike the character and want to be better than them to knock them down a peg basically. It almost simulates the experience of standing up to a schoolyard bully. That might be a bit extreme, which is why I use the word almost. Newer rivals, by comparison, drive this motivation via mutual growth and camaraderie. It's a healthier motivator, you could argue. And it does make sense in today's culture where support and lifting each other up is more widely valued. So newer rivals still provide competition, but put the emphasis on shared success. It's more about mutual passion than animosity and a brutal struggle to be the best. I suppose the idea is that friendly rivalry is a healthier motivator for success than pure spite for the other person is. That you should want to grow and improve for your own personal benefit, rather than just to knock the stuffing out of someone that called you a loser a few times. I've historically always advocated for the more antagonistic rivals because it creates a more emotional investment for me. I enjoy the tension. It makes the battles far more climactic when they come around. There's a bigger satisfaction for me that comes from defeating a rival that's been taunting you and questioning your skills as a Pokémon trainer. It feels more significant as an achievement to prove them wrong, almost like an underdog overcoming adversity. I suppose we half got that in Scarlet and Violet's DLC with Kieran. When he falls into his whole villain saga, you could argue that that was Pokémon bringing back a more spiteful and arrogant rival. Kieran's story is far too layered though in my opinion to be truly placed in that archetype of rival. It could have been Pokémon dipping their toes in the water again though. I mean, to be honest, the same could be said for Bede in Sword and Shield, Gladion in Sun and Moon. Those characters could all be arguments for antagonistic rivals not leaving Pokémon completely. But as I said, they all have much deeper roles in the story, and they're very much secondary rivals as a result of that. They aren't front and centre. They provide a sprinkle of balance in that area though, if nothing else. Conversely, friendly rivals contribute to a more relaxed and supportive journey through the game, which does carry its positives too. For younger and more casual players especially, a friendlier rival can feel more inclusive and help to carry their enthusiasm through the game. A bit like they've got a friend who is willing them on to keep pushing and get stronger. I suppose it's kinda like when one of your friends joins the gym, and it motivates you to consider doing the same thing. Gym, another fitting analogy there. These friendlier rivals are there to encourage in a context that emphasizes personal development, using that to push you on through the game. That's the headline of it. It also allows the main narratives of the game to truly take center stage, especially in a game like Scarlet and Violet where there's a pretty deep and rich story taking place. Shoehorning a blunt and antagonistic rival in there too wouldn't really work well in my opinion. That'd probably be a bit jarring and distracting if you were learning about the Herba Mystica and suddenly this brutish rival comes in and tries to stick their nose in. It would just feel off. And on the other side of that same coin, I suppose it allows the rivals themselves to have richer character development. It isn't just a case of the rival being mean and then eventually learning that being mean is bad. There's room for them to have their own subplots within the game that's intertwined with the player's own progress. Hop is a great example of this, starting his adventure as an enthusiastic, inexperienced trainer, and eventually finding his own path as a Pokémon researcher. So while I very much enjoy the more cocky and antagonistic rivals myself, I understand that a lot of that could be driven by nostalgia for a time that was culturally very different. It's natural for a lot of older players to look upon the newer rivals with skepticism. Pokémon is a series enjoyed by a very broad range of ages nowadays, so Game Freak does face an ongoing challenge to balance the experience to make the games approachable for all players. Another angle to consider is the broader trends in video game design and storytelling. Modern games often focus on character development and emotional engagement. Basically, our attention spans are pretty fried nowadays, so we need that extra depth to keep us hooked and keep us playing. Friendly rivals fit well into this whole paradigm by fostering relationships based on mutual respect and growth. This is all starting to sound a bit academic, isn't it? Basically, the narratives in recent Pokémon games have become more complex and nuanced. From my perspective anyway. Characters now have more detailed backstories and personal struggles, and it allows players to feel a connection with their rivals that's on a more personal level, and that's what makes the battles with them feel impactful now. For instance, and funnily enough I'm going back a fair way for this example, Barry in Pokémon Diamond and Pearl starts as an overconfident and annoyingly impatient trainer, but his journey alongside the player helps him mature and understand the value of patience and strategy. His progress runs parallel to the player's own progress, creating a more intertwined and satisfying arc to the game's story. Also, as I briefly touched on earlier, the shift to friendlier rivals reflects changes in cultural attitudes towards competition and rivalry. In a more modern world that increasingly values empathy and teamwork, having rivals who embody those traits probably does have a better chance of resonating with those modern players. The emphasis on positive reinforcement and shared success lines up with those values. This is purely anecdotal, but friendly rivals seem to have more unique teams too, and a bit more personality to their teams as opposed to just having Pokémon that are specifically there to cause you as much grief as possible. That variety can make battles more interesting and more like an epic anime battle, I guess you could say. So to eventually circle back to the original question, are Pokémon rivals worse now? Everything taken into account, I personally don't think so. I just think they've changed and been adapted to modern storytelling. I actually think there's room for both, given it works with the game's narrative of course. We've seen plenty of Pokémon games with multiple rivals now. Who's to say we can't have a friendly, supportive rival and a truly bitter, antagonistic rival at the same time? I think there's definitely space to explore that. Having multiple rivals with very different attitudes and motivations could help cater to a wider range of players. It would provide the intense, high-stake battles that veteran players crave, while also offering the supportive, growth-focused interactions that newer or younger players might lean towards. A blend like that could create a more balanced and enriching experience for everyone. Either way, it will be interesting to see how Pokémon and Game Freak continue to evolve the rival concept to cater to that very diverse audience. And that's my piece on the situation. I'd of course be interested to hear what you guys make of it all. Do you prefer the newer, friendlier rivals? Or do you crave the conflict and tension of the older, more spiteful rivals? Drop all your thoughts and opinions down in the comments. While you're down there, if you want to support the channel for free, please do drop a like on the video. Trust me, every single one helps me a lot. Subscribe for more Pokemon videos. Thank you so much for watching, take it easy, and I will catch you all in the next one.